But what if you didn't?
All right. We're live for episode 2 of Sagas and Sass. We are going to be discussing the second half of Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. So we're finishing the first book in the Grishaverse books in terms of publication order, at least. We'll go through and just kind of reintroduce ourselves real quick, and then we'll dig into it. So again, my name is Tara. I am, I guess, your main host, sort of, in that I put this whole thing together from the beginning. But I'm very happy to be joined by some very good friends of mine. So you can find me across the web at A Geek Saga, or also organizing Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire convention, blah, blah, blah. And we have Nick.
Hi, I'm Nick Popio. You can find me most places at Nick Popio. General good old-fashioned geek. Good times.
Nami, I think, is under me on the screen anyway.
Hi, I'm Nami. I can be found almost everywhere on the internet as Necronami Cosplay. I love cosplaying and I love reading. And that's all the insight I have right now. There we go.
All right, Jonathan, you last but not least.
I'm Jonathan. I'm a longtime science fiction fantasy fan who can be found about here because I'm a Luddite and don't have any fancy Twitter followers or really any other media presence.
I mean, honestly, I'm jealous of you for that because right now I'm trying to keep up with like several Instagram and Twitter accounts and God knows how many Facebook pages and TikTok, and I just can't. It's like it's real fun. Okay, so now that we've gone through that real quick, so the last time we were here 2 weeks ago, we had talked about approximately the first half of Shadow and Bone, and where it ended was the Darkling had just kissed Alina. And and I think that and we knew that there was like a big to do coming up, like a big gathering coming up, whatever. The fete, yeah, the winter ball, whatever. I honestly don't remember what they call it, but. So yeah, we knew that was coming up and all that. But the second half of this book, it goes really quickly into some big reveals. So I guess, well, first of all, they go to the ball fete, whatever the heck it was called, and there's a whole very like YA sexual fantasy scene between Alina and the Darkling that like. Reading it the first time, I think I kind of read through it, was like, oh no, whatever. And now reading it the second time, like kind of having already read the books and knowing what happens, I was like, oh my God, this is so bad. And you know, she goes through this whole thing where the Darkling hates this winter ball and having to perform for the
nobles.
The nobles, yeah. There's a word for it that starts with an O. The people who aren't Grisha. So he doesn't really like it.
Kaya or something like that.
Otsitskaya, yeah.
Muggles.
Yeah, Muggles. Yeah, that's a much easier word to say. So he hates doing it, but they do it anyway. And Alina does a really good job. Yay, Alina! She, you know, but I think at this point, mostly because he is still there to amplify her or whatever. But she like creates the little rainbow in the water and stuff, and he praises her, and then he makes out with her hardcore in a dark room. And yeah,
it says he can't control himself.
Yeah. Like again, like I said, I think the first time I read it, it wasn't like it was sexy or something, but I just kind of passed over it as like, this is the thing that is happening. And this time I read it and I was like, oh no, this is icky. He's so icky. Everything about this is icky.
Icky. For those of you who are just listening in podcast form versus watching us, for that whole description, I was just shaking my head and like drawing my face into my neck to make more chins of disgust because I can never have enough chins to express how icky that man is.
Chins of disgust.
That is an amazing description.
Yeah, I love can try to do that. I don't know. It's not working for me.
I think it's because of the angle of my laptop. You have to sort of come from like a below angle. If that's my hey, make sure you're on the stream alarm. Spoiler, I'm on the stream.
Yeah. So yeah, like it's just a really kind of like uncomfortable scene as a whole. I don't know, like Nick and Jonathan, this was your first time reading this, so like for you guys, did you immediately feel uncomfortable with it, or like did you kind of like, were you like me the first time, like where I glossed over it because I didn't?
I wasn't
know.
as uncomfortable because I mean, to me, it's a little bit of a trope: the young girl and the immortal. I mean, that's been in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's been in other stories, but as far as this particular, I definitely got the impression he was doing this more to use her than because he was actually in love with her, which is more debatable in some of the others.
I appreciate that that Leigh kind of used that trope to show us how manipulative it is. Like inherently, we know there are issues with when there's a power imbalance, right? Anytime in a relationship where there's a power imbalance, that's problematic. And I appreciate that Leigh used the context around the scene and the scene itself to kind of remind us, like, hey, this is kind of fucked up. And she, Alina, has just vastly less power. What she even says after it happens, something to the effect of, the Darkling can just disappear, but I don't have that luxury. She has to like slink back and like try to make sure that she's not seen, and has to check herself in the mirror and see how messed up she is. I mean, to me, it's disgusting is probably too strong of a word, but it's it was really upsetting for me to like read that and think about it in the context of, this is a young woman who has been preyed on by this like immortal creature. And to Jonathan's point, this is clearly something that's been done countless times, but usually it's not done in a way where we're actually sitting there and thinking about it. Usually it's like with Angel and Buffy or whatever, we're like, oh my god, it's such a great relationship, and I just really hope that they make it.
Yeah, but Angel and Spike was not. I'm sorry, Angel and Spike. Buffy and Spike.
Angel and Spike. That's
Buffy and Spike.
That's some fanfic.
If you read my fanfic, you would know that that's a really consensual and beautiful relationship. And besides, they're both immortal, so it's fine. But yeah, no, I on first read, it was very upsetting. But if I had read this when I was like a teenager, I don't think that I would have had the same reaction. So if I was like the actual YA audience, I don't think I would have had that ability to sort of see it as this very manipulative act. Although I do think that Leigh was being very deliberate with that.
See, I think the most interesting thing about this actually is that I have been participating in the Grishaverse fandom more than I was when I initially read the books. I actually just participated in like a Grishaverse Big Bang, which is essentially like it's an event that pairs writers and authors. So a writer will write a fic, and then and multiple artists can pick fics within the group and create art for it. So I was really blessed, and I got to write a fic for that, and I got amazing art from it, and it was really great. But the weird thing about being in that group was seeing just how many people liked the Darkling, and just how many people liked Alina and the Darkling as a pairing. And not only that, but noticing that the majority of fans of Alina and the Darkling were like middle-aged white ladies. No offense, Tara. Like, literally.
Hey, I am not in that realm yet.
No, I am middle-aged.
I
am middle-aged.
I am not there yet.
I am middle-aged, and Tara is almost 20 years younger than me, so...
It was literally starting in their 30s and going up. And all these, like white ladies were just like, yeah, we love this pairing. And I'm like, ma'am, is your partner abusing you? Do you not
honestly, I ran into very similar things back when I was involved in the Song of Ice and Fire fanfic and fandom like community with Jorah Dany shippers. So I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking you were going to be like Littlefinger and Sansa.
Oh God, no! I stayed far away. Like I know that existed, but I literally I participated in some things where there was like you were assigned. You know, like you said what you were willing to write about, and you were assigned like a pairing or whatever. So I participated in some things about that, and I was very specific about what I was willing to write about, you know. And like one time I made the mistake of saying I was willing to write about Jorah and Dany, but I did specify not in like a shippy way. So I wrote this whole like Jorah pining after Dany thing. The person I wrote it for loved it, you know, because like I knew what I was doing, but at the same time, like. Yeah, I'm not writing this as like a couple. This is not happening.
It's just so weird, like to see that. Like I literally specifically made friends in the Grishaverse fandom based off of who was incredibly disgusted by the Darkling and didn't do that whole didn't do the oh look at that cute evil man. I'm gonna save him. That's why I love him. And I think the good thing is that it's a bit more difficult, I think, to do that with the Darkling because, or rather, I think we're past the time when people do that by default. Because the way that I'm like comparing this, for example, is to Loki. Because Loki is like the default, like almost every girl is like, I love Loki. Like, we love Loki more than Thor. Thor is a dum-dum. We love Loki. And listen, been there, done that. Still love him. Acknowledge that he is a garbage, trash, chaos man. But, you know, it's sort of like, if this was back in the Loki time, I could understand people just being like, oh, I love the Darkling. Like, his mom seems like she was the worst. And I'm like, let's stop with blaming Baghra out here. That woman has the patience of a saint for sitting by and just watching her son do this as she is not strong enough to stop him. And that poor lady, I feel so bad for her. But that's a different topic. But like, I find it so weird that people can like and defend the Darkling when even from his introduction, he is viewed as a very powerful, very manipulative person. Like, there's never a time when I saw the Darkling and I heard about him and I didn't think he was a bit creepy sketchy. But also, in fairness, I did start by reading Six of Crows. And when you read Six of Crows first, you know, you have a little idea that something is up with him and that he wasn't cool.
I mean, as someone who read this trilogy first, I will say, like, up until kind of the very end of Shadow and Bone, I really do think that the Darkling was like a well-written character. It was that moment, and we'll get into this later, but there was that one moment where it's like, oh no, he's really just totally bad, where he's not one of those like villains where you can kind of sympathize a little bit with where he's coming from, you know. He just like, I mean, I put this in the document, but like, how about those shocking reveals? Like, so they go to this party, and then immediately after that, like, we find out that the Darkling has always been the Darkling. He's been lying the whole time. He's just been like coming back and saying like he was his own like son or something, and Baghra is his mom, and he's actually a bad guy, like a villain, and not like a regular run-of-the-mill villain. He literally wipes out an entire city's worth of people to prove his power, you know, to make the Fërdins and the Shuhan and really the Robkins as well, like bow to him, and that in and of itself, it was kind of like, I don't know that Leigh Bardugo could have done it any other way for the story that she wanted to tell, of course, but I feel like he went from being really well written, almost understandable bad guy, even with what we hear from Baghra, to, oh my God, he literally just, committed genocide in a way.
Well,
yeah, I think another important thing is that, like, I always thought he was well written. I just think, as an adult, it's difficult to read about him and be like, yes, we're going to have sympathy for this character. And I think that's okay in a villain. I think you can understand why a villain does what they do because of good writing. So, like, as the series goes on, I think you can very much understand why the Darkling is who he is and why he does it. But it definitely comes down to one of those cool motives, still murder moments where it's like, oh, absolutely, I get this. This is this motive, A+, all understandable, still murder. And I think that's also an example of really good writing, because it takes a lot to be able to write a villain that makes sense, but also is utterly irredeemable, because genocide.
I do wish that in that context they had done more in sort of the conflict between Ravka and the Fjordans and the I'm blanking on the other.
Shahan.
Yeah.
Shahan, yeah. We know very little about it, you're right.
Because the justification for protecting Ravka, while it's there and I understand it, I think it could have made the Darkling a more compelling villain if we had known more about that tension and why we need to, like, protect Ravka. Otherwise, it really, to me, the Darkling came off as not necessarily a megalomaniac, but like I need to consolidate and expand my power, and I want to be in control of everything. He had, like, the tiniest sliver of, like, I'm doing this for a good reason, but, like, really, at least in the second half of the book, it really was, I'm trying to gain more power. And the justification was like, oh yeah, because Ravka needs to be protected.
It's not clear to me.
Sorry. Hold on, I want to hear what Jonathan has to say.
It's not clear to me whether it's a chicken and egg thing about at least at this point in the books, and I haven't read the other books yet. So to me, it's not clear what started the wars between the different countries. Yes, they're anti-Grishna in these other countries, which has been made clear. But are they anti-Grishna because the Grishna basically attacked them originally? There's no backstory to tell you what caused the conflict at this point.
And to be honest, there isn't in these 3 books. There isn't. You get more of that backstory in the Six of Crows duology, and you get. I think it's mostly in the Six of Crows duology, especially maybe Crooked Kingdom. You get quite a bit of the more so the Fjordan stuff than the Shuhan, I believe. It's been a while since I read them, but yeah, I mean, we'll definitely get to that eventually. But that's definitely a weak point of these books, and I get it not being in the first one, but it really isn't. They really don't go into detail with it in the second or third books in this trilogy either. Or Leigh doesn't in the second or third book either, and maybe it's because she was saving it up, for future, novels to build her world more, and that's understandable. But yeah, it is kind of like. But that's the thing, I guess. Maybe we don't really need to know what the conflicts are, because in the end, he's not harming, like, he's threatening them, but he's not harming them yet. He is killing his own people. And I think that's the key. You know what I mean? Like, he does not hesitate to kill an entire, is it just one city? It's just Novokirsk.
It's one. Yeah.
Novokirsk. He doesn't hesitate to kill, like, an entire city's worth of his own people, just to prove that he can make this worse for them,
So I also think I have a very different POV on, like, the vague war idea because of my age. So this is like very US history absorbed. So I was in second grade when 9/11 happened, and I am currently 26. And that means that a lot of the young adult, like the target audience for YA books right now, were born as 9/11 happened. So these are kids that have grown up knowing the war in the Middle East, but not really, really knowing it. And the war has always been there. And so I think for me that even though I was old enough when 9/11 happened to know like the reason that like the US went to war, etc., I think the idea of like a vague war with no justification explicitly is enough for me to just sort of be like, yeah, that's what it is. Of course we're at war. And that comes from having a younger perspective and like sort of growing up with that US history sort of like idea there and like that experience. So to me, going into a book where they never really describe what this war is, just, yeah, Ravka's been at war, I sort of was more accepting of that. And I was like, yeah, of course, the war. Cool. Because let's be fair, all of the Middle Eastern conflicts with the US has literally been the war to me growing up.
1000% agree with that.
And yeah, I mean, honestly, I was in elementary school when the first Gulf War was going on. I mean, I'm talking first or second grade, and I remember, I can't remember what year it was. It was whatever year Bush ran against. Oh my God, like old, like Grandpa Bush, old Bush, not George W. ran against.
The older.
It was 90. It was 90. It was 90. Well, the first Gulf War was in 91.
So it wouldn't have been 92 because that was Clinton and Bush. So it was
92.
88. Oh God, I am aging myself really.
Yeah, yeah.
Now. I remember the 88 election and these like vague, like where we were. The Gulf War was still an issue. It was an issue then.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't like there was some sort of conflict.
The Gulf War was 91, and I know that because I was recently married, and I remember watching the start of it. From at my father-in-law's
house. You know what I am? I'm misconstruing Clinton versus George Bush. That's what I'm doing with. I mean, I was very young. Let me be very clear. I am aging myself, but I was very young. But I mean, like I just remember like as a kid being like, well, why are we going over there? And like, people around me kind of everybody being shocked that Bush didn't win re-election. Because I lived in like a really small town. So, I mean, in New England, by the way, but still a very small town, very like blue collar, but in that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bush was also an old school New England Republican.
Yeah. So yeah, it was definitely like I just remember there being this whole like there's a war and we're supposed to care about it. And as a kid, like I remember like being like almost kind of told like how I was supposed to think about the election, and I'm God, in 92, I was like 9. Okay. 9, like again, aging myself, but yeah, I mean, our whole, there was a big part of like the mid to late 90s where there wasn't any, bullshit wars, but like, I mean,
but like
my early adult childhood years and my early adult years were filled with that. And yeah, I think that, I don't know, this idea that you just have to destroy, innocence to prove a point is very political.
Another reason for me that like Ravka's whole continued miscellaneous background conflict sort of was like normal for me, because the idea of a country being wholly at peace when you're raised in the US in the 2000s is absurd, which is a really sad thing to think about, actually. So I'm going to not think about that. That's my plan. But so I think another thing that really struck with me was that so much of the Darkling's rhetoric to me sounded like the reason for me that I was very accepting of his current megalomaniac, like absurd ways is because to me, I was like, this is somebody who has had 400 years of this motivation and has devolved. Like what I could see, like what I saw with him destroying, like extending the Shadowfold and like destroying that city, was a man who's just been trying to make things better for Grisha for 400 years. And at this point is like, you know what? Fuck it. Nothing works. Doing it my way. Except
Well, I would agree with that, except for the fact that he's the one who created the fold in the first place.
Yeah.
Which it makes it like, that was the part that I really felt like there needed to be some kind of greater bridge, maybe.
Tara, I can't remember. Is there more of an explanation of why he creates the fold, or do I just have this idea in my head that's like fanon creation?
I don't think it's never like an explanation of why or how.
Because
it's basically like he was
accident.
I do think it was an accident. I think that he thought he could do something, and it ended up in this big just explosion, essentially.
Do they ever say what he was trying to do?
I honestly don't know. To be honest,
if that happens, it has to happen in a later book.
Yeah.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. It definitely doesn't happen in the first one.
Yeah, and
it certainly hasn't happened in most of the second, which I'm almost done with. So,
probably not.
I'm doing something for my own benefit, which is Googling it right now, just because it's gonna bother me now.
I mean, I think, well, don't say too much, because we are only.
I absolutely will not. Oh wait, nope. Google isn't even helping. Never mind. I got.
Yeah, I think that, like, the thing is, like, I think the he's just power hungry. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of the point with, like, yes, we don't really need to know right now what the war between, Ravka or I don't even know if there are wars, conflicts between Ravka and Shuhan and Fjerda are. We don't really need to know that. We know they exist. And we know that they might have something to do with the way Grisha are treated, but probably more just like land grabs and stuff. Honestly, it's all very Eastern European. Like, as somebody who is a history major, my God, have you ever read about like literally any Eastern European history from like 1870 to like 1920? It is just a mess. Like, it's all just them, it's like land grabs and weird little power struggles and like monarchs and leaders you don't care about and have never heard about because they never taught it in schools, because it matters in the grand scheme of things. It literally caused World War I in the end, but like it's also minuscule compared to like the world as a whole. And I think that's maybe kind of the point here is like the conflicts between them are minuscule. What's important is the Darkling it's his grab for power, and it's not just against Fjerda and Shuhan. It's in Ravka too. I mean, he literally has Genya. I mean, we don't know what she did, poison the king and queen. We don't know if she poisoned them or if she just made them sick, because she is a corporalki, like, regardless of the fact that she was a tailor and not, a heart render or whatever. Like, she
was a plastic surgeon. That's what she was.
Right. But that's the thing, though. She was clearly talented.
From med school.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So she's clearly talented and knows what she's doing. And she definitely did something to them, whether it was poison or whatever. But like, I mean, he wants control. And granted, yeah, sure, the king is weak and a jerk and the queen is awful too. But like, he just wants to rule the world.
Mm-hmm. I think another really interesting point that you brought up here is sort of like how the war doesn't really matter in the background of everything, because the real threat is interior. And like, God, if that doesn't ring with American politics right now, cry.
Which is funny, because this was written like 8 years ago, or well, 10, this was written 10 years ago, published 8 years ago. But yeah.
It's sort of funny to me. Like, it reminds me of another like accidentally relevant thing. So like, I don't know if you guys are musical people, but I love this musical called Hadestown. And one of the songs is literally like the megalomaniac ruler of the underworld, Hades, singing a song called "Why Do We Build the Wall?"
Yep.
And this came out like years before,
because the concept album came out like forever ago, and then the musical happened.
And literally, there's like interviews with the author or with the composer, and she's like, "Yeah, I did not expect this to have this much relevance or political commentary, but here we are. Welcome to 2016."
I mean, I saw Hadestown on Broadway, and specifically seeing that song performed was just like
chills.
This like, yes. Chills,
I actually saw it December of last year, and unfortunately I got stuck in traffic on my way there, so I arrived late, but I also sat in my seat the moment Persephone shows up and Hermes turns and says, "You're late." And I was like, I am late. But yeah, so, accidental political relevance, just like, in like the parallel of like the corruption within your own country is, maybe something you should pay an eye on.
I don't think it's an accidental political relevance. I think it's a historical political relevance. I mean, most countries fall from within. It's not external threats that do them in. Yeah. Rome fell from within. The British Empire essentially fell from within. They weren't conquered. Russia fell from within, right? France, the French Revolution. I mean, it's all, even the U.S. colonies to a certain degree, and then we had the Civil War. So while we always have these militaries to defend the country, the bigger threats tend to be from within.
Yeah.
Also, in this case, it just happens to be one very powerful person.
Ayo.
So one of the other things I wanted to talk about was the Darkling. He put shocking reveal in a way. He put the collar, the Mortzova's collar, the stag antlers on Alina so that he could control her. And I don't know if this is oh my God, there's a term for it that I'm blanking on right now. Like when the author writes something on purpose so that there's a term for it that I'm blanking out right now, but like he put it on her so he could control her, but because she spared the stag's life, she wasn't going to kill it. Mm-hmm. She can also control the power, or she can
fight him off.
She can fight him off essentially, but also she can harness the power of the stag because she spared the stag. Now, obviously, or I guess I would think it would be obvious that if the stag hadn't died and she didn't have the collar, she obviously never would have had that power. She still needs the physical amplifier. But it's, he did it so that he could control her. And in the end, it becomes her power too. And I think that's kind of important, especially when it comes to like, when you think about like abusive relationships and stuff, like the way that people try to own you and control you, you can often turn that back around on them, whether you know it or not right away. I guess like I hate to say this, but like sometimes people's weaknesses or sometimes what people deem your weaknesses are actually your strength, I guess is maybe the best way to put it.
I think it was like a really good example of like compassion being used as a power.
That too, yeah.
And I think it's so important in like, YA books and fantasy books in general, because I love the fantasy genre. I am a slut for the fantasy genre. But one thing I will also say is that the fantasy genre really sort of makes you forget about the value of life at times, just because of how many people tend to die in battles and conflicts, or like the hero and like, and like as somebody who's a fan of like video games and stuff and all of that, like, like sometimes you forget that like people are actually dying. And like for somebody who's a main character and a really powerful main character in a fantasy book for YA people, it's so important that she chooses the like compassionate route even towards an animal, because so often in these series it's like, yeah, okay, like she's a warrior, she's an assassin, like of course she's gonna kill people, it's fine, like she's still our protagonist, so we still care about her and we still think she's good, which is, you know, that's also fine. That's like definitely a POV that needs to be heard. But I think the thing that's more lacking in like the YA genre is the compassionate hero, and I think that's really what you get with Alina, which is so nice, because god dang, I've had enough of assassin main characters. I tried to read a book recently that was main character is like the best assassin ever, and I'm like, bitch just killed so many people. Like I can't. I don't really like her.
I think I just read that book. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
That's was a whole other podcast.
I know.
But... yeah. I mean, honestly, like, also, I don't know about any of you, but like the whole thing where they were like going after the stag and then they find it and it's so magical. And like, I am not like a vegetarian. I am like my family hunts. I have eaten the deer meat from the deer that they have killed. Okay. But like, it's just this whole like, oh, it's this magical stag and he's so pretty. And he like comes up and he's kind of like, she touches him. And it's like, no, and like, this is so. But like when he dies, it's like I didn't cry, but it was close there. It was
just to me, it really felt like a unicorn. It felt like that world's equivalent of like the sort of magical purity and wholesomeness that a unicorn is. And to me, it was literally like, you know, God, I hate to bring up Harry Potter again with J.K. Turf, but it was literally Harry in the Forbidden Forest, like realizing that Voldemort's killing unicorns, or Quirrell's killing unicorns and drinking unicorn blood to get Voldemort back. And it was like literally like that level of like quintessential evil, that you would kill the one thing of its kind just for power. And it was like that moment of like absolute disgust and just like absolute sadness for like a beautiful animal. And like, yeah, let's be real, I'm a vegetarian, but I'm a vegetarian because my family is, and I don't really like, I like animals, but I'm also the type of realist that I'm like, well, we have to eat something and it's not sustainable for everyone to be vegetarian. So
well, and you also get, I think, sort of after the death, you also get that cruelty of the Darkling where he's like, I never cared about the creature, I only cared about the power. He specifically tells them to burn the stag because he's done with it. Like, he's got the antlers. He doesn't give a fuck.
Don't even bother eating it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, there's something about also the difference in the approach that I think is really creates that dichotomy, right, between Alina and Mal, and then the Darkling and Ivan and all the others who are kind of like on the, well, we have to do this to further the Darkling's goals, which are also the Grisha's goals, apparently.
Wow.
Question mark.
You know.
Well, that's how the Darkling has certainly set it up, you know, and that's why the Grisha follow him, even when he's clearly doing something that is extremely not okay. And, you know, again, that's a little bit of the, oh, look, we're, you know, seeing media that was created well before the rise of Trump that really is showing us like, oh, yeah, no, there's tons of people who will just do whatever it is that they think is quote unquote right because their demagogue has said this is what we have to do in order to protect our way of being.
Well, I think it is even further than that. It's the demagogue himself has convinced himself that he's in the righteousness of his cause. I mean, I don't
have to, right?
Right.
Like,
I mean, you know, Stalin and Hitler didn't consider themselves bad guys.
No, absolutely. And clearly the Darkling is like, well, I have to do this. But his perception of morality has also been warped by so many different things, as Baghra tells us.
Well, yeah, because he's lived for how long? Like, we don't even know, but it's been
Yeah.
a couple hundred years at least.
Well,
it's been.
Considering Baghra is his mom and she's still around and talking about shit, then yeah, like it's been forever basically. Also, Baghra is the real MVP here, y'all. Love Alina, but Baghra, we stand a legend.
How does she still? Like, how is she still even alive? Like, I know that they say Grisha live a really long time. Like,
low key, I'm pretty sure that if I had a son like that, I would live long out of spite.
But
yeah, you got to just to find the person who literally could potentially overthrow him, groom them to overthrow your son, and then like that's the end of the book, right?
You'd hope anyway.
I need you guys to
Of course, there's 2 more books in the trilogy.
I need you guys to vibe with me here for a second, but like I have fan cast Baghra in my head as what's her name? Oh my god. Hold up. I'm gonna Google it real quick.
Thank goodness for Google.
I know, right?
Are you gonna share the screen of your
Google results?
Oh, Michelle Gomez. So she's the actress with like the really defined cheekbones and like beautiful facial structure. And she's like the I think I want to say she's like
played Missy on Doctor Who.
Yeah, she played Missy on Doctor Who, and I love her. And she does like weird villainy vibes or like weird crazy old vibes like very well, and I think she has just such a distinctive look that I think she could play Baghra as being old but still be awesome.
You don't think she's too young an actress to play Baghra?
I mean, let's be fair,
she's younger than me.
all women
prosthetics and makeup can do anything.
Young roles,
well, of course,
and old actresses don't really have a space at all, which is absurd. But I like her look. Like I'm not picking her based off of age. I'm picking her because her face is just something that makes sense to me as Baghra. Like I know Baghra's supposed to be old and like look old visibly, and I think that they could age Michelle Gomez with makeup really well, but I think she just has such a distinctive and like strikingly beautiful look that I think it would be perfect for Baghra. And somebody like posted it on like Twitter or Tumblr, and I was just like, yeah!
Probably Tumblr. That sounds like a Tumblr fan cast, let's be real.
That 100% sounds like Tumblr fan cast.
Yeah, I wrote back on Tumblr for the Grishaverse Big Bang, and honestly, I cannot remember how to use that platform at all. What?
I have not used Tumblr in like 6 years, 8 years. I don't know. It's been a long time.
Do you want to see who they actually cast for the role?
Who?
Someone named Zoe Wanamaker.
Zoe.
Okay.
Zoe Wanamaker.
Zoe Wanamaker.
Oh, she played what's her name in Harry Potter? Dang it.
Oh, okay. I do like her. She has a good look for her.
What's her name in Harry Potter?
1 second.
Is her name Hooch?
It might be Hooch.
She looks like Hooch. I think that's
Madam Hooch. Who's Madam Hooch? She's the
flying instructor. Yes, it's Madam
Hooch.
Flying
instructor. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah, I see that. Right. I like her. I like her look. She's cool.
I think I have to rewatch Harry Potter because I honestly don't remember a thing about her, but like, fine.
Do you need to rewatch Harry Potter?
No, probably. Listen, I already own I've owned the Blu-rays for years, so like I feel like I'm not doing any harm by rewatching them. It's not like I'm purchasing them.
Oh yeah,
or even watching them on a streaming service.
Actually, so like this is a bit of a Harry Potter tangent, but I think the other reason that Alina's like compassion weighs so like strongly to me is because the last time you really see that sort of compassion or like the like valuing of life is in Harry Potter with like unforgivable curse is murder and splits your soul, and you don't really see that impact on killing is bad that much in most fantasy media. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Lord of the Rings to pieces, but like, damn, so many people die. Like, damn. Granted,
they're literally Song of Ice and Fire, like every other chapter is like there was a battle and 20,000 people, like 20,000, and
that's not even to mention like all the main characters that also die. It's like, like so much high fantasy involves so much death because it's like medieval setting, it makes sense. But like also at the same time, it's nice to have high fantasy with, hey, death isn't good, y'all. Reminder, human life has a value. And I think that's like even more something that we need a reminder right now of COVID times, just because like seeing numbers of people dying is so much different when you actually think about, oh yeah, this is a person. And I don't mean to be a downer about it and bring up the evil stay-at-home virus, but like it's like big numbers and human brains don't function well, and it's so easy to forget that numbers are people when it comes to things like death. And I think that reminding you of that in a fantasy setting is the one thing that Harry Potter did well.
Yeah,
and that's all I'm giving it right now. What?
Friendship is a superpower.
I said, yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah, friendship is a superpower. Okay, so some of the things there were some quotes from Leigh Bardugo that I wanted to kind of talk about, and they kind of this isn't the best segue probably, but one of the like I actually like I usually have like I always have a pen. Maybe people hate this, but like I always have like a pretty like colored gel pen, and I like underline passages that I like, and there weren't really that many in this book that I felt were like super important. But this is I believe this passage came from very soon after like Baghra like told her what and who the Darkling really was, where she's thinking back to the Darkling saying the problem with wanting is that it makes us weak. And she thinks how right he was. I'd wanted so badly to belong somewhere, anywhere. I'd been so eager to please him, so proud to keep his secrets, but I'd never bothered to question what he might really want, what his true motives might be. Put on your pretty clothes and wait for the next kiss, the next kind word. Wait for the stag, wait for the collar, wait to be made into a murderer and a slave. And one of the things that I read from there's like some Q&A stuff with the author at the end of these books, and one of the things that Leigh said was, in terms of some kind of message, I think it's worth asking how much of ourselves we are willing to sacrifice for the sake of belonging to someone or something. For me, that's the question at the heart of Shadow and Bone, of this book. And I mean, I think, I don't know about you guys, but like as somebody who grew up, like a total nerd who was just kind of like on the outskirts and outside of everything, that idea, that need to belong to something has led me down some pretty dark paths.
Yeah.
Not that I've done super horrible things or anything, but like it's definitely led me to make some bad choices. Led me to allow some pretty awful people into my lives, led me to not let go of awful people soon enough, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's a really good message. I mean, really to give to anybody, but especially young adults. But honestly, like I remember reading this a few years ago, and this is after I'd kind of been through the worst of what I'd been through, and just reading this book and finishing it and being like, wow, that was like, it wasn't about just an abusive relationship, but it did a really good job of showing how easy it is to fall into something that's not healthy. And how hard it is to get out. I mean, maybe not in the like I mean, Alina leaves. Yeah, she as soon as Baghra tells her what's going on, she leaves. That's fiction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, she still has a hard time getting out. She knows the Darkling is after them. She knows, and he catches her eventually anyway. Like I feel like a lot of this the need to belong can really, you can sacrifice parts of yourself that you don't mean to sacrifice,
I absolutely highlighted the same section. Deeply resonated for me. It's interesting. So I don't know how familiar you all are with the geek social fallacies. There's basically, I don't know when it was written, but it was written a while ago because I remember it from like a decade ago. But there's essentially 5 core geek social fallacies that a lot of geeks fall into because we are outsiders from a very early time, right? And so they are ostracizers are evil. So you should never ostracize anybody. You should never exclude anybody. Their friends accept me as I am, and so I shouldn't have to change. If you really are my friend, you should accept me for who I am, and therefore I should also accept other people for who they are, and should not expect them to have to change. Friendship is over everything. So if you're friends with somebody, that's more important than anything else. They are friendship is transitive. So if I'm friends with Tara, then I therefore have to also be friends with Nami. Or alternatively, if I'm friends with Tara and I'm friends with Nami, then Tara and Nami should be friends. Now, luckily, this more or less seems to be the case in our situation, but often isn't. And then the final one is friends do everything together. So if the four of us were all friends, we would have to invite all of everybody to everything, right? So even if Jonathan didn't like getting pedicures, then he would still have to be invited, even though he might complain the entire time that we're
Oh, I have a better one. Nami doesn't eat meat, but we're inviting her to the Brazilian steakhouse.
Perfect. Exactly.
Let's eat a Korean barbecue. My FOMO demands it.
There's actually a picture of me in India in 1989 getting treated like a king or a sultan with getting a manicure and pedicure that my aunt says is her favorite picture of me, and I'm humiliated by it. So
pedicures are the greatest thing in the world, and I adore them, and will get them any chance that I can. But the example is really irrelevant.
Text my mom,
right? The important thing is, like, because of the ostracization that we often go through and the exclusion, we end up in these scenarios where we're excusing other people's behavior because we want to feel included and we want them to feel included. And I think that's really damaging and really important to call out and to hold ourselves and hold others accountable for, because it can lead to some really horrible and toxic things. And I know Tara and I have both experienced that. I'm betting Jonathan and Nami have experienced that. And I think it's something that is particularly because we have that background, we have to then also say, that's not okay. This behavior is not okay. And that's the thing that I think I actually really love about this book, is that Alina is saying, look, I could have all of these great privileges, but I also recognize that this is inherently wrong, and I am not going to allow this to happen, and I'm going to call this out, even though it is at my own detriment. Now, it's a fantasy book. There's a lot of other stuff going on, but at the core, like, that's the message that I take away from it, is no matter what your level of privilege is, you have to then be willing to say, it doesn't matter if I'm giving up everything. If I'm doing the right thing, if I'm, taking these people and holding them accountable for these actions, I have to do that. That's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's so good to see a book value holding people accountable versus finding a place of belonging. Because that's also, like, finding a place of belonging is such a nerd theme, and making sure to, like, tell young nerds and be like, hey, see how this is bad? Like, don't let yourself stay in a bad situation just because you could belong there. And it's so important, because, like, been there, done that, like all of us, I'm sure. And I think, to me, that's one of the other reasons that I was so confused when people in the fandom are just like, yes, she should have stayed with him. I'm like, what? Absolutely not. Get out. And this brings me to, like, another, like, big quote in the book, the Darkling's whole "fine, make me your villain." I love that quote for two reasons. Because of the absolutely obvious gaslighting that is going on, the in your face, this is him being manipulative, this is gaslighting, this is not okay, and how obvious it is that it's not okay, and the fact that it's also it just further escalates his shitty villainness. And I love that. Because, like, sometimes, let's be fair, I thrive in a villain that is so evil that even though you understand why they got there, that you're like, fuck this dude. And that's what the Darkling is for me. And that's why the fandom with their Darkling stance, and they're like, oh my god, we love the Darkling, he's our little baby. And yes, we ship Alina and the Darkling in a healthy, wholesome relationship where she saved him from his hundreds of years of evil. I'm just like, I don't understand. Like,
some people can't come back, y'all. I'm sorry, but some people can't come back. That's just
also
thing is that Leigh wrote like the abusiveness of this relationship and the importance of like finding your place being offset by doing what is healthy for you so well that I find it so intrinsically upsetting that some people saw the point, they saw it was right here, and they were like, but what if I went this way or this way, or what about if I just went to Mars? I'm like, what? How did you get it so wrong? It's fine.
Also,
I will never understand.
People can absolutely try to redeem themselves, and you still don't have to forgive them.
Yep.
Big yes. That is the hey, babies. If there are any babies listen to this, or adults who are still making terrible decisions for yourself, that's the one. If somebody wrongs you, you don't have to forgive them. You are not required to forgive people. For example, don't forgive the Darkling. That man literally put a slave power on Alina. Like,
literally murdered like an entire city's worth of people. It's fine.
Committed genocide, made a powerful person literally his slave. Like, maybe don't forgive him. Maybe if you're his mother, plot his demise. I don't know.
I don't even know if Baghra. I do have like my issues with Baghra because I feel like she's like, it's that epitome of like a mother's love or whatever. She's like, I don't like my kid, but I love him. And it's like, yo, he is unredeemable.
I read Baghra as that very tired old woman who just gave the fuck up. I read her so much as like, oh my god, I know my son is shit. I don't know what to do anymore.
I think but she didn't though, because she says that like she still hopes like that she can like fix it or whatever.
And come back to like the stupid family ideals that people sometimes hold of like family love is unconditional, blah 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 blah. That's stupid. I always believe that my family can be redeemed. That I don't agree with. That whole blood is thicker than water is a misquote. Nope. And the actual quote is like the blood of the covenant, something that the way it boils down to is blood is not thicker than water. Choose your own friends, buddy. The people you choose are more important than family. And I think that
in some cases, yeah.
And I think the thing that I took from Baghra the most is like the danger of the blood is thicker than water ideal, in the fact that like she's literally holding on to hope for this like truly lost cause, and that she's going to love him no matter what, when like, ma'am, you should have strangled him as an infant. Maybe not actually.
Yeah, but she didn't know that at the time.
She didn't know that at that time.
But if we introduce time travel, she should go back and strangle him as a child. That's the major moral that we should take away.
11
That's the
kill baby Hitler is the moral.
Well, and I mean, in the vein of not knowing what he was capable of or whatever, like he did, we know now he was the same person who created the Fold. And I liked this quote from the author where she said, in fantasy, darkness usually operates as a metaphor. I wanted to make it a literal physical thing, and that idea became the shadow hold. And there was some preceding like explanation where she was essentially like scared of her own shadow trying to walk home one night. Which as a woman is kind of,
big mood.
Feel that in my heart. I've literally been walking my dogs and I'm like, walk faster. You have to walk faster. But she's right. Like in fantasy, darkness is usually a metaphor, and the fact that she, created, she wrote the shadow fold where darkness, it's something that they can like almost literally feel. And it has its monsters too, but like it is the way it's described by Alina every time she goes into it, even before she has had her, you know, I mean, the first time she goes into it, it's like a weight almost. The darkness is like a weight, which is, to me, as somebody who needs like pitch darkness to sleep, to the point where I will either, I have like a giant sleep mask that covers like half my head, or I will put a pillow over my head, and sometimes both. Like, to me, like, I'm like, yeah, whatever, darkness, yeah, that's good. It's good for sleep. But just the way that the Shadowfold is written, it's its own, it in and of itself is a bad guy in this series. So
I think the coolest thing about the Shadowfold is that the way Leigh wrote it, it made me think of that fear of being a woman and walking alone at night. Like, it viscerally reminded me of that fear. And I think the cool thing about the way that she wrote it is that that fear is now translatable to people who've never had that experience. And it's also like, you know, the further personification of, you know, fantasy, darkness, the concept, but evil, but like real. But I think for me, the reason it really stuck is like, creepy walking alone at night. And that
I think that's so important.
In the snow in New York City at 3:00 in the morning.
God. Oh man, Tara, don't do this to me.
It's a story.
I think it's so important for that analogy to really be driven home. And I specifically think it's important for men to read, because generally speaking, men don't have the same experience, right? Like, we might be scared at some point in the dark, but it's not the same fear that men experiences and a woman experiences pretty much, you know, throughout their life, of being on a street alone, or you know, thinking about, am I able to run right now? I think the more that we can help men understand that fear, the easier it is then for them to understand where women are coming from on a day-to-day basis, because we don't have that day-to-day experience. We don't have that lived experience. And for some people, being able to relate requires that more visceral understanding of happening, which is unfortunate. It would be nice if like everybody could be like, oh, I get that that's your experience, and so I'm going to treat that as, instead of saying, well, that's not my experience, so it can't be real.
Yeah, I think,
and that's one of the things I get really frustrated with men in general.
Yeah, I think the really striking thing about the Shadowfold is that it brings that experience sort of like to the day as well, you know, in real life. Because like, you know, the fear for existing alone as a woman, like trying to go places alone, it's not just at night. It's always, it's anytime there isn't another woman in your vicinity. It's anytime there isn't like something explicitly safe. And explicitly safe could be security, but most often even then it's not. And, you know, the thing that really strikes that is that the constant vigilance that they have out of fear of the Volcra approaching, and like the exhaustion of that constant vigilance and the fear of entering at all, because while people make it out and they can be okay, what if they're the unlucky one? And that is the female experience.
And I think like writing a female character, like a young, I mean, let's be honest, especially in the beginning of the book, but I mean, even at the end of this book, even with knowing what her power is and being able to harness it, and more to this color, like having it be kind of a young, let's be honest, like overall weak compared to a lot of other women in this series, female character be the one who has the ability to just defeat it with simple light is like really important, because it's showing you that like I and I don't know, maybe I'm reading into this or whatever, but I want to hope that the author was trying to say that, like, no matter who you are, no matter how much you might question yourself and think like, I'm not this person, I can't be strong, that you have that light in you to kind of, I don't know, defeat the dark, move on. I don't know.
No, I like that. And honestly, like, I think that's probably part of her message, but even if it wasn't what Leigh intended, like, that's the beauty of literature, and that's the beauty of, like, reading, is that you can put your own value on things. And I think that's such an important thing to pull from this book, because, for me, the big things that stuck from this book were Alina's compassion, the amazing depiction of abuse and being able to pull away from it, even though it's, simplified for fantasy's sake, the need to value yourself and your well-being over a sense of belonging, even though belonging is important. And then finally, the idea that you don't need to be the typical strong, powerful fantasy hero to be strong, and that, like, levels of strength do exist. And just because you're, like, skinny, frail, sickly Alina doesn't mean that you got the light. People, you got the light. I'm going to stop punching the air dramatically.
You punch that air, not me.
Yeah.
I mean, so I guess like Nick, you've already kind of said your piece about, like, the darkness or whatever. Like, Jonathan, how do you feel about Alina kind of going from, like, the weak? I mean, let's be honest, like, she thought she was useless, even though we all knew she wasn't from the beginning, because, like, we knew that she had saved Mal and everything. Like,
yeah, like, full on in the army. Like, obviously she's not useless, but, like,
yeah, I was gonna say she was a map maker in the army. I mean, she obviously had some skills, and people saw her work.
I guess she's very self-aggrandizing, which,
yeah, she reads very.
I used to be that way, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, big same.
I mean, when I was little baby Tara, I was self-aggrandizing as fuck. But, like, then I realized, like, listen, I have my weaknesses. I'm not good at everything. But at the same time, like, my weaknesses in some cases are my strengths.
Yeah.
Like the ability to humanize oneself when you're, like, set aside as a leader. That sounds really stuck up, but, like, people always talk to me about how I have no problem discussing, like, the hard things that I'm going through. And yeah, that's because, like, I am out there as, like, sort of a public persona with, like, running a convention and everything. And like, if you don't have that humanizing, like, perspective, then you just become this sort of, like, I don't know, this person that people set aside. And I like that about Alina, that she is the sun summoner. And when eventually she has the collar and she's super strong. But even before that, nobody really knows that she's struggling with her power. And she is consistently humanizing herself.
I think the lesson that the author was trying to say is, Alina, the whole book, she always showed compassion, and how, they portrayed her as being weak, and then she realizes the compassion is her source of strength, not a weakness, with the stag. So I think that's where the author was going with it. That was my interpretation, anyway.
I also.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
I keep saying I think my other thing. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch this and see how many times I say that, just, like, out of curiosity. But to continue, I think my other thing is that
that's just your phrase now.
It's my catchphrase now.
As opposed to like.
As opposed to like, yeah, that used to be my catchphrase. But it's really interesting to see how much Alina humanizes herself, and especially as a younger person going into, like, so I just finished my master's, and that's a field where you as a person constantly think you're underqualified until you see the people around you also think the same thing. And it's that imposter syndrome idea that even when people think you're great, like you probably don't think that. And I think Alina like personifies that in people so much, and just her self-depreciatingness is everything that like people do these days. And like literally like it's so interesting to see that in somebody like Alina. And while she's humanizing herself, you can also see that like in many of these aspects that she is wrong, and I think Leigh manages to balance that in a really interesting way, because obviously you're only getting Alina's perspective in all of this, but it's still clear in certain matters that like even though she's like very doubtful of her position and power, like it's still very clear that like she is someone who is deserving of this and like deserving of like her new position because of her power. And that's like something very obvious to the reader in a very interesting way. And I think that's really cool, because I hope that it would also make young people who, or just people in general who like feel that doubt about themselves always, like maybe also see that, hey, no, it's okay. Like everybody feels this. I promise you, you're like, God, imposter syndrome, man.
Well, and I think like some of it is that she's deserving of it because of her power, but let's be honest, she's also deserving of it because of the person that she is. She is the person who brings Genya in and refuses to ostracize her when she's supposed to.
Yep.
You know, she like she is the person who should have killed that stag, like all these other Grisha killed the animals that they got their amplifiers from, but she couldn't, you know, like she is like we keep using the word compassionate, and that is so important. And I'll be honest, like I'm not gonna, no spoilers, but like you see some of that compassion kind of she loses some of that compassion as time goes on because of what she's gone through. And like, it's very important to remember who she was throughout this book, because if you don't like,
yeah, I also think that keeping a reminder in your mind about book 1 Alina is really important for understanding how characters react to her in book 2 and 3. And I think once again I'm going to talk about backlash to my certain favorite character. Like this character gets a lot of backlash for being upset that people change. And you know, when somebody goes from being so compassionate to being something different, well, of course you're going to notice. And I think it's Alina's changes throughout the book series are one of like the most striking, and I truly did not realize how much she had changed from the first book until I reread the first book, because I forgot she was this good in a sense.
Well, I mean, and it's not just her. It's like you forget even everything with the Darkling. It's like you think he's bad. Wait.
Yeah, it's like it's a really
wait.
But I thought he was dead now.
But
oh my God, are we supposed to believe he's dead? I mean,
no,
let's be real. At the end of this book, Alina, and this is something that she feels bad for about it at the time. She leaves the skiff of people to kind of
with innocent people on it who were just happened to be along for the ride, for the Darkling to impress.
Yeah, were they innocent though? It's kind of like if it was like Trump on a skiff with a bunch of people who were like, we're just gonna stick with this dude because he's the guy in power.
There were some ambassadors on that skiff.
Oh, the ambassadors. Yeah. Those the couple ambassadors. Yes, they were those poor people, but they're Grisha and everything.
3 people. They were innocent.
I read it as Hitler on a skiff with his Nazis and 3 people who were willing to talk to Hitler. So I was like,
there you go.
Zero compassion here. But also, that's probably bad. Mommy's not Alina, if we couldn't tell.
Okay, so
I feel like we don't need to get into the like.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, before they were on the skiff, you didn't.
They were just dudes, yeah.
They were just dudes, and even the Darkling had yet to do anything truly evil at that point.
Yeah, but like if you could go back in time and murder the Darkling before he murdered an entire
No, I understand,
city,
but I mean,
then...
we're trying to read it. We're trying to discuss this book as we read it, and at that point, you don't know what the Darkling is going to do. Right. So
I feel like we do know.
No. I mean, let's be real. Alina did not know what he was going to do.
That's true.
She did not know that he was going to expand the fold. She thought that she was there to prove that they could. I mean, she didn't want to be part of what was going on. She knew something bad was going to happen, but she had no idea. No, I absolutely believe, and not the ambassadors aside, I absolutely believe nobody on that skiff, other than the Darkling, had any idea of what he was actually going to do. And I think that's, and listen, that's actually a very important point. Like, so when you have no idea what this awful person is going to do, okay, and then they do this awful thing, what do you do? I mean, because I'm pretty sure Genya was on that skiff, and she was just like.
And it's also revealed that Genya has done some
pretty
not
hideous
good stuff.
Right. I mean,
but I get
she's poisoned their shitty king who raped her. But you know, it's. I'm not. Listen, I'm like hard. I'm hard pressed to like judge Genya too.
No, I love Genya to pieces.
100%.
Like 100%. Like poison the rapist. Like do it, girl. 11 out of 10. I support you. Maybe don't
murder, but also all rapists. I'm cool with that.
Poison. I mean, maybe don't poison his wife, but also she sounds like she's a rape apologist. So like, I don't know, man.
I mean, don't poison her. No, she didn't poison her though. She didn't. I don't think there's nothing. No, there's nothing wrong with the queen. She just Genya isn't there anymore, so she's like.
Right.
Her live-in makeup artist left.
Yeah. Her daily plastic surgeon is no longer available. Yeah.
I think though that like.
But Genya also does. Sorry.
No, go for it. Finish, because I was about to change gears again.
I was going to say that she does basically say, well, like, I know the Darkling's going to do some horrible things, but, like, he's helped me, so maybe it's okay.
But I still don't believe for a second that any of them knew that he was going to...
No, I agree with that. I totally agree that
of the bad
outside of Alina, I would argue that Alina at least knew that he was planning to extend the fold, if not actually outright kill citizens. She did absolutely know that he was planning to extend the fold. But outside of Alina, I don't think anybody else on those skiffs knew just what the Darkling was planning. Maybe Ivan.
Ivan absolutely.
He's a dick. He's a dick. I don't like him.
Is kind of
he can die in a fire. Like,
I mean, what I don't quite understand. Now I'm trying to put myself in the darker point of view. He could have showed that he could extend the fold without actually wiping out the town. So why did he do that?
Because he's
dramatic. He's a dramatic.
Yes.
Because he's evil.
Because I mean, the point would have been made anyway.
He's like my dog acting like I've ruined her life by putting her in a crate for 45 minutes, and she tries to break out, and there's like a mess all over like the corner of my bedroom where her crate is. Like that, just dramatic bitch.
And John, I think that's another. I think your point here is a really good point. Like, you're a good person. As a good person, you cannot understand why he would do this, and. Honestly good, because if you could understand why he would do this, I would be worried for your character. But yeah, like
we'd maybe have to reconsider the hosts of this show.
we need more evil hosts.
Like me, Nick, and Nami are like, yeah, we totally get why he did it. Like, it was absolutely awful, but we totally get it. And Jonathan's over like, I don't understand it. Like, again, yeah, Jonathan, pure AF over here.
Yeah.
Pure AF. We're all like, yes, we understand the motivations of this villain. And Jonathan's like, but that's bad.
Well, no, I think he could have. I'm just thinking of it from a logical standpoint. He could have accomplished the same thing without doing it. So why would you go through the motions of doing it?
So, sometimes you just want to die.
Because it wouldn't have been as dramatic. Honestly, it would not have been as dramatic. Like, you're right. He absolutely could have made his point without killing an entire city's worth of people, but it wouldn't have made his point the way he wanted to make his point. Like, he's just a bad dude. He wants to run the world. Like,
sometimes when you're drinking that evil Kool-Aid, it's not enough to drink it. You gotta drown in it.
I mean, he literally like killed a miraculous being and like placed a collar. I mean, and honestly, let's not even talk about the symbolism of a collar and control, like it's a dog or something, like Alina is a dog or something. That has always grossed me out. But like, especially because she can't, like, it is
can't remove it
around her neck, and she cannot remove it by herself.
How does she walk underneath that? Honestly, like, is her neck?
Well, to be fair, deer antlers are not. They're very, very light. They're almost hollow. Like
Tara, is her neck smelly? Can she wash under it?
I don't want to think about.
You could probably like lift the antlers up a little bit and like wash underneath there. But it also, it's interesting to me, Tara, like what you were talking about, and to me, the collaring is very much like a dominant submissive collaring ceremony, effectively. So for anybody who's not familiar, like that's a whole aspect of kink community of a dominant or a master collaring a submissive or a slave, and basically demonstrating that they have some level of ownership over that person. And so
the biggest thing with that though is that like in the kink community, it happens with enthusiastic consent.
Yes. Exactly. Yes, that's exactly it, Nami. Yes. It should always be done with, but I do think that also then feeds into the whole thing that we've been talking about abusive relationships, about all those things, because that is absolutely something that happens in the kink community, that like
happens
there
in every
are super yes absolutely.
Creepy people are everywhere. Rip.
Rip.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. Like, but the idea of like the collar around her neck, and
to me, I just a lot of the descriptions of amplifiers for Grisha use words like collars, shackles, cuffs, things like that. Like, it was never bracelet or necklace, and to me, it always read as being trapped. So it was like, even though this is power, it's to me, it always felt like you were being trapped into this power. And
also you have to murder a like magical animal, like not just any living creature, like a special like magical creature, in order to get
it always
that
read
amplifier.
To me as, like, you get power, but it's absolutely a trap. And I think the other thing that really stuck with me is that, for me, like the non-consensual collaring for Alina just read this like you know, the history of slavery in America, because, and like with all of like the wording, and like obviously Alina is not, you know, a Black person, so like it doesn't sit there. But that's the other reason that I don't understand why people like Alina and the Darkling. I'm like, he is making her his slave. Like,
and not just like mental slave, as in like you have to do what I tell you, or like you're gonna get whipped. Literally, like he touches her and he controls her. Like, that is
like, it read like slavery.
I have so many things about this when it comes to like abusive relationships that I would love to discuss, but also like I feel like that's too deep for me to get into.
No, it was just like, it was so disgustingly like slavery that I was just like, how can people look at this and think that this relationship could be salvageable? Like,
the same way people look at Joker and Harley and think, oh my God, relationship goals.
Yikes. Can we talk about, speaking of Joker and Harley, I just found like a comic snippet of like Poison Ivy full on like going into Joker's house and being like, hey, I would murder you, but Harley would kill me because she still cares about you, but you're nothing, so stop thinking you're shit. And I was like,
I literally saw the same one today, and yes, I had the same reaction.
I think it might have been because I shared it.
It might have been.
Was this a meme?
No, it's a comic. John, go on my Facebook page. I've shared it. It's like from an actual comic strip. So it's basically like Poison Ivy full on going in and like telling the Joker he's not shit, and the Joker being
well,
like,
now I feel like we're talking about it, so I have to share it on the like actual webcast Facebook page. So
do it. It's so good. It's so worth it. Like,
I mean, I will say, listen, like my most liked Instagram post ever is a picture of from DragonCon of me as Poison Ivy proposing to my friend Becca as Harley Quinn.
A+, I love it. The best. So. It's my favorite. Also, I'm so happy to say that this generation, like, people have just grown up to be Poison Ivy, which is like protect nature and like screw the government. And I'm like, girl, I get you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love the new Harley Quinn show.
Nobody wants
the Harley Quinn show on that started on DC Universe and is now on HBO Max. Have you seen it?
Ooh,
yes, it's so good.
Time to check it out.
It's hilarious, but it's the most four-lettered thing I've watched since Deadwood.
Yes,
also highly recommend. Definitely check it out.
Deadwood is very good too. Yes.
Well, I mean, on that note, so one last question before we end for the night, I think. What was your favorite moment or scene in Shadow and Bone? Nobody's going to go first? Do I have to go first?
I'll just jump in. I highlighted this quote because I loved it so much. This was his soul made flesh, the truth of him laid bare in the blazing sun, shorn of mystery and shadow. This was the truth behind the handsome face and the miraculous powers. The truth was the dead and empty space between the stars, a wasteland peopled by frightened monsters. I just was like, oh, that's so fucking good.
Yeah, it really is.
And so obviously it's describing the Darkling, and also describes a lot of the really terrible people that either I've directly interacted with or who might be like running a country or something. But it really just stuck out to me as like, this is what we are fighting against. And it tied for me back to that concept of compassion as a source of power. And I think if we can kind of see, hopefully, definitely Alina, and then like hopefully some of ourselves in contrast to that of, let's fight against that. Let's show compassion. Let's show kindness, and use those as our guideposts for how do we treat other people. Then like that's going to be a pretty good place to operate from.
All right, anybody else, or do I have to go next?
Well, my favorite scene was actually when she came into her power and realized that compassion was the source of it, and that was my favorite scene. But I'm a sucker for those types of scenes, so
absolutely,
yeah, that's a really good one. Mine is, it's something I've already mentioned. Mine is fine, make me your villain, but not for the reasons that people might think so. I love that scene because it was, to me, the payoff of being suspicious of the Darkling this whole time. It was the payoff of thinking that this man was garbage and being suspicious of his motivations and like the creeper vibes. And to me, that was the moment where it hit, where I was like, yeah, this man is evil. And I think I love it so much because people try to romanticize it and be like, oh, like, blah, 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 gaslighting bullshit. And I'm like, this man gaslights her to the point of trying to trick her that him being full straight up evil is not a real thing. And just seeing that happen and seeing how it plays out and seeing how full of shit he is in that moment was just, to me, it was so rewarding, and so rewarding in the way that I was like, fuck this dude. Bury him in the ground. Do not bring him back. Fine, make me your villain. Bitch, I beat you to that. You already were. And if Loki, if I'd been Alina at that point, and like, let's be real, I would not have been Alina at this point, because the minute he tried to kiss me, I would have like full on kicked him in the dick. But that aside, if he had said this to me, I would have just been like, sir, I did that months ago. Where are you at, buddy? And I think just like that line was the moment where I was like, and we're throwing him off the cliff, irredeemable. We already low-key knew it, but now we've confirmed it. Good.
Mm-hmm. It's just mine is a little bit weird. Mine is
go for it.
The moment that she lets go of Mal. Like she lets go of him, and that's how she like realizes her own power. And like I realized that the reasons she lets go of him, obviously we learn later, he was trying to contact her, she was trying to contact him, neither one of their letters were getting through. You know, it wasn't that they were ignoring each other or whatever. But like she realizes that like or she just kind of like, she realizes that he, like the thoughts of him and her love for him is what has been, what does that say? I spent my life running after Mal. Yeah. Instead, she let him go. Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I'm old enough, y'all, where I could say like, there is no good that comes out of running after a person you're interested in. Dude, girl, they, whatever. There is no good that comes out of running after a person that you're interested in. And you could let them go and maybe they'll come back to you. Or maybe they won't. Like, or maybe they were never yours in the first place and they're never going to be. But like, you're never going to realize like your own worth until you stop that shit. So it was her, regardless of whether or not, and to be honest, I knew, especially reading it again this time around, I knew what was going to happen. But like, and I think like if I'd known the first time, I know maybe I did, I don't know. It's been so long, it's like 4 or 5 years since I read these books the first time, but like, that moment where she let go of him and she was able to harness her own power because she let go of him. It was very much that like, stop relying on other people. Stop waiting on other people. Like, live your life, do your thing, like be yourself. Don't wait on other people for any reason, literally any reason. And I'm not just talking about relationship shit. So that was like,
it's so poetic too, because like, you know, literally the reason she isn't discovered as a Grisha is because she suppresses it to stay close to Mal. And it's such an important message of don't make yourself lesser to be close to people.
Yep.
And
I don't think I mean I don't think she knew what she was then.
Oh no.
You know, I'll follow that, you know, but yeah,
I conscious decision. But I think that's another thing that like we also do in real life a lot. Like, you know, it brings me back to like being in 6th grade and trying to make friends with more of like the mainstream normal girls and like suppressing my nerdy self because I wanted to be friends with these normal pretty people and like get close to my crush, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, whether or not you do it intentionally or not, don't make yourself less than who you are as a person in order to stay close to other people. Be who you are and like be the most authentic to yourself. And if those people are meant to be near you, they'll come back to you. And if they're not meant to be near you, they won't. And that's also okay. And like, just like the balance of how that works. Like, yeah, okay, I take it back, Tara. I'm going to borrow your favorite moment. I'm keeping, can I have it too? It's really good. I forgot how much I liked it. I have like butterfly memory and I literally finished rereading the book like the hour after our stream the first time around. So it's been 2 weeks, which is apparently too much for my butterfly brain. So forgot I liked that bit.
That butterfly flaps its wings. It's fine.
Where am I
all right. So any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Can we have a Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy moment where Zoya realizes that the Darkling's crashed and goes and rescues Alina from him, and they can both just be gay and happy and destroy men?
Yeah, so Alina. Which one would be Harley though? I feel like Zoya would actually be Harley because she was the one that was obsessed with the Darkling from the start.
Yeah, she was also like definitely the long time abused one. So
yeah.
You could make an argument that Genya could be Harley as well.
True.
All three of them happy lesbians. Let's go.
Perfect.
That's it. That's the plan.
Our next fan fiction is written.
Listen, you act like
you, right? All right. So, any other last thoughts? We'll be back, by the way, 2 weeks from now, and we'll be discussing the entirety of Siege and Storm. So yeah, it's probably going to be about a 2-hour one for that. But to be honest, like, I'm already like most of the way through that book. So like I Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising are kind of much, since we've already established our thoughts on the culture and everything as a whole, I think we'll be good. And we'll start splitting the books again after that. But yeah, so
scream. It's hard for me to tell where each book starts because I bought the whole series on a Kindle and it just sort of goes one to the other without really a split. So it's
honestly, I've been forcing myself to not read ahead just because I'm so much into fandom that like I don't even know if the things I'm saying are fandom creations at times. And I do this with like Harry Potter now. I do this with like all of my fandoms. And I'm like, if you're discussing the book for a thing, you need to actually discuss the book and not your weird crack shit fan theories about how Alina and Zoya is the best pairing because their powers literally make a rainbow.
I mean, I have literally I've read ahead. I'm almost done with Siege and Storm, but like,
wow.
I have to do that because I know there's going to be a time. I know there's going to be a time where I can't do the things.
Yeah. You have
like when I go to California next weekend. So anyway,
we have lives.
Yes, I know. Ha, shocking. I wish I didn't.
That's why I read this at last night at 1 a.m.
All right. So no other last thoughts? We're good? All right.
We're good.
Thank you guys so much. This was so much fun again. And I will see you in 2 weeks where we will talk about the entirety, just a reminder, of Siege and Storm. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, thank you again. I am Tara. I'm here with Nick, Nami, and Jonathan, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Yay.
Bye, guys.